All right, so we're going live in 3, 2, 1, and we are live. Alrighty. So, hello everyone. We just went through a little bit of a session, talking with some sponsors, hearing about the questions, and right now we're going to run our first workshop of the weekend. I'm like totally hearing the feedback. Can we pause? I'm good.
I just muted I'm going to mute myself now.
I don't know why I can hear myself. Okay. Anyway. So thank you so much for all coming out this weekend. Tonight is the Figma Workshop. This is going to be run by, this is being run by Rachel and Longshi. And so the two of them have a lot of Figma experience. And so I'll pass it over to the two of them.
Yeah,
Rachel,
thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So it's so great to have all of you guys here. I know I've been really excited for all of this happening because I got involved with UX probably I guess only 6 or 7 months ago now. And I was like, what's UX? That sounds interesting, because just a background on me, I am studying psychology, neuroscience, and behavior at McMaster, and that naturally leads into, trying to understand humans, and I feel like that's what UX is all about. So I took basically a design course through Udacity and got the basics, and I'm really excited to share a little bit of that with you guys tonight. Longshi, do you want to introduce yourself there?
Yeah, so exactly what Rachel said. I think that if as someone also in science, you just have that natural curiosity as to designing and how to, I guess, increase accessibility. And I guess, unlike Rachel, I don't really have an official credential in this, but I am taking a design thinking course where we're learning about how to design with empathy in mind. And I think that is a huge theme that we do definitely want to create workshop today, which is that you don't need to be, I think, coming from a special arts program to do UI UX. A lot of people don't. And in fact, coming from a new perspective, such as any field in STEM, often gives you an advantage because you can think in ways that traditional designers might not be able to.
You absolutely just put that perfectly there. And I think that's why, thank you. That's something that I think holds a lot of people back, is this perspective that really in anything that I'm not good enough, I don't have the formal credential, or I don't have, for me, I'm I'm not going to university for this, why is anyone listening to me? But the thing is as soon as you start doing it, you start learning, and you'll see obviously we're not complete experts in this. We've just started our journey, and it's really all about continuing that. So throughout this event, if you have any questions, please just hit the chat up. And since there's 2 of us, for at least half of it, we'll definitely try and answer all of those as best we can. And if not, we'll get back to you. And yeah, I am just going to share my screen here.
And also feel free to reach out to us on Slack or the appropriate problems channels. We'll try to respond as soon as we can.
Exactly. Basically, we got you, Okay, so there we go. We've got my screen here. And we'll just go over to this beautiful little brief presentation. I know that you guys are all let's just get into Figma. I don't know what I'm doing. Or maybe you're not. Let me know in the chat. But I thought that we should start this off. First of all, I talked a little bit about this overview of, okay, what are we doing tonight? Also, I can't see what the chat is happening now, so Longshi, just interrupt me, please. But I know that Longshi just talked about design thinking. And I'd like if you guys could actually put in the chat what you think that is. I don't know if you're more experienced here, thanks for joining us. We'd love to have your expertise talking about it there. But yeah, maybe Longshi, do you want to give me like a 20-second what's design to you?
For me, I think designing is a lot about redesigning. Oftentimes, you don't come up with something novel, but you're taking something that has a lot of problems with it and trying to fix it. But that is not all that design is. Obviously, there's more to it.
Yeah, that's really good, because I think, and this is something that maybe you're here tonight and you're like, oh, I want to come up with something super new, super innovative. And it's not always about that. It's not, like innovation isn't the end goal. The end goal is solving problems. And to me, that's what design is this creative way of thinking about, what is it that the problem is and how can we solve that in a way that makes other people's lives better. And this is really also what UX UI is. And it's become this whole, thing in the technology industry that is like, oh, we want to have a good user experience. We want things to be intuitive. Like, to start off with, that's such a, it's just become this buzzword, really. But there's a real core understanding to that is really important. That is all about, we all have assumptions that we're making, and we all have these expectations for when we're using a product, and how we expect that to happen. So in this weekend, maybe this is your first introduction to all of this. That's okay. I don't want to overwhelm you, but I do just want to show you this image. And this image is something that you will see again and again, because this is sort of, the guidebook essentially to being a UX designer is how do I go about my practice? And so tonight we received these prompts, obviously, of this is what we're trying to solve. How can we solve this? And the thing that everyone jumps to is like, okay, they want me to design an app, for recipes or whatever. And immediately it's like, okay, let's just get in there. Let's design this app for recipes. But that doesn't just happen on step 4 here. It starts on step 1 here. And so ideally what you're doing is, reaching out to those connections that you have. Maybe you have a friend who has diabetes, for example, and you want to learn about their life and their process, which admittedly is very, very hard to do in one weekend. So some of this is obviously going to be skipping a little, but we're trying to have a full process here. So once you've had that time to learn about the user, and this image that I have here is really helpful because it's, understanding all of the different activities that you can do as well. So you'll notice things like having, focus groups or data analysis, but really you can also just be going out and looking at what other companies are doing. Like, for example, recipe apps aren't a new thing. They're different than, the goal that My Palette is trying to solve, but you can find inspiration from different sources. And that's going to help you have this empathy for users and sort of think about this jobs to be done thing of what are people hiring whatever you're creating to be. And so once you've done this, that's when you're going to go in there and you're going to have these brainstorm sessions and sort of mind map it out and try and create the experience you want. And this is also just going to come from this user journey thought of, what is my user experiencing at each part of the way there. Longshi, do you want to add anything to what I'm saying so far?
I think, Rachel, you might be a little bit intimidating everyone out there who is not familiar with design thinking.
I don't want to do that.
Definitely takes a lot longer than the weekend that you have. So I think what is more important, as I think as takeaway, is because I see like Johnson was asking about, are we sending out the slides? And we will provide you with resources if you need them, but just draw inspiration from this. I think the key takeaway here is don't jump to a solution. I mean, feel free to do so, but oftentimes having a more informed design is better than a design that leads to assumptions that might not be correct.
Yeah, I think, if you're gonna, thanks for doing that for me, because the last thing I want to do is intimidate you guys here. But the takeaway really is just put those assumptions aside, and don't be aiming for, just beautiful design in terms of, UI experience. You're aiming for functionality, and that's what's going to happen from these first steps here, and then eventually, of course, we get into the prototyping part, and this is where I want to spend the rest of the time, is delving into really the technology that is going to help you get there, and have something to show for all of your work on these first few steps here. But before we do that, I also want to just mention this last step of testing. And this is, obviously this whole pathway is not a linear pathway. It's something that you're sort of jumping around, and you're wanting to have feedback at every part here. So this top part is really accurate of, you want feedback at all times. So when you get to that, prototype and you're like, okay, I'm making it there, I'm doing this, like, we're gonna submit something, because I bet you at some points this weekend you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, this is a wreck, like people aren't responding to my DMs when I'm like, let's meet. But yeah, so that testing part is key as well. And when we send out these slides, this is going to be really helpful for you if you're overwhelmed right now. I'm not going to talk about this at all, but I just wanted to have this here because one thing that I often questioned at the beginning stages for me was like, there's so many tools out there. What do they all do? So when we send out these slides, you'll have a little bit more information in terms of, what's the difference between Whimsical and Miro. Oh, this one is for wireframing, this one's for brainstorming. Really, they do most of the same things, but I think that's a helpful resource. And these are some other resources that you can use as well. One thing I want to mention is that there are design systems out there. So if you're like, I don't have a clue what I'm doing, this is another place that you can go for inspiration. But that's enough overwhelming you for now. We have 40 minutes, so I just want to get on over to Figma here. And so this is Figma. I don't know. I'm going to jump in and say, I think that this is a Figma workshop, but there's more apps out there. So if you don't feel comfortable using Figma, feel free to use another tool. Like, at the end of the day, we're not evaluating you on your expertise in Figma. We're evaluating the final product, and it doesn't matter how you get there, I think. But yes, Rachel, go ahead. Yeah, that was perfect. Thank you. So here we are in Figma. If you're using something else, if you really like Adobe XD or something else, like that's really great. And honestly, the first thing I have to tell you is like, literally go Google stuff. Like, though I had this boot camp in design, a lot more of it was on those first steps and understanding the process. So, and my background in research is sort of like leads me to be stronger in that. So I'm definitely still learning, and still I am Googling all the time, like, what does this do? Or what does this do? But there's a lot of it that is quite intuitive and quite helpful. So let's just go back to the files here, because this is what you're going to see when you open up Figma for the first time. And one thing, I know that people were mentioning it in Slack, one thing that you do want to take note of is if you're a student, then you can get the education plan, and that means that you can be using multiple users easily on one document, which is why sort of we're going with Figma, as it's so easy to be sharing. So you open it up, you're going to see, all of your, you got it.
Sorry, that if you do have individuals who are not students, XD also offers collaborative work, and it's totally free with an Adobe account. You don't have to pay for it. So that is also an alternative if you want to collaborate.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And when you open up Figma, you're going to see all of your recently used documents here. You'll notice that, for example, I now use Figma for like a lot of stuff. So, for example, I have an animal behavior midterm that I should be studying for that I created in here because it's so versatile. And what I want you to do is create a new document. So you're going to do that with the new file plus icon here. And that's going to bring you in to a new workspace. And mine is loading very slowly. So my apologies for that. But once you're in a new workspace, it's not going to look like this at all, actually.
Do you want me to? I can share my screen if you want to talk through it, if that's something you.
Yeah, that would work. Just so I can also see some questions then. Do I need to stop sharing there?
How do I?
You got it?
Yes, I think I should be able to share. Are you able to see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm on the. If you guys do experience really slow web browser, I guess response times, I really recommend downloading the app. It's great. It's fast. Yes, it's amazing.
It's convenient. You can design from anywhere. So that is perfect. Okay, so Longshi's just opened up a new blank document. And so let's first just go through the layout. If there's anything super specific that you're wanting to see, then just put it in the chat. But yeah, let's first go through the layout of things. So if we just go through the top screen, what Longshi's on right now is just the literally just like the move. So you can go through move or scale, and that's just going to make you more comfortable with your workspace when you have a lot of stuff going on. It can get a little bit hectic and a little bit crazy in there, so that's really helpful. But to the left of that, you're going to be able to see your typical like menu bar, and that's how you can also go back to the rest of your files. And you can go through your files, edit, and this is a little bit strange actually, Longshi, with you going through them. If you want to talk through each of them,
sure. I guess I'm gonna take a divergence from Rachel, and I think I'm gonna explain what the top menu bit looks like, where I'm hovering my mouse, where you see the several icons. Because I think I personally, as someone who uses the desktop app, I just use the top bar instead of the sidebar for all the tools. But these icons are where your most used tools will be. Like very rarely will you go in here and look into like plugins, for example. But to start off, I guess maybe I can ask the chat, how many of you guys are familiar with another graphic design tool such as Illustrator, Photoshop, or Figma? And we can just like give 10 seconds to answer, maybe.
Yeah,
Rachel.
it's like the 15-second lag type of thing. But I know while we're waiting, Miriam is also asking about wireframes, and that's something that you can totally do on Figma, and we can show you that after we go through all of the menus,
Yes.
because it's something that's super easy and really good to do on here. There's a whole bunch of other applications that you can use to do that, but yeah, it really doesn't. Oh, there's a chat. Minimal Figma experience. Well, that's why you're here, Alicia. That's perfect. I'm so glad you joined us. No experience. Okay. Perfect.
So I guess how I would explain it, the most important takeaway right now is that this gray screen you see has nothing on it. There's no piece of paper. It's not like a piece of paper for you to draw on. Yes, you can put elements into it, but what we need are called frames. And this is where Figma is very powerful. As Rachel said, she can write her midterm on, or she can study for her midterm on it.
I need all the help I can get.
If you can click frame, you'll see on your right-hand side that there's a lot of different options. You can make basically a piece of paper or a frame that is the size of, let's say, an iPhone 11 Pro. Or you can create a frame that is the size of, under paper, that is the size of a letter paper. So an 8.5 by 11 paper. Oh, that's not 8.5 by 11 anymore. But like Figma is very powerful because you can easily design things to scales. And these are the paper now you create your elements on, if that makes any sense. So then we move forward. Now we move forward to, I guess, the next, button, which I'm just going to expand to show that this is like the button where you start creating your elements. You're free to import pictures. You're free to copy and paste assets from like Adobe Illustrator. But this is where you can start drawing things. So let's say, for example, we want to create a rectangle. Sorry, I'm clicking shift as I do this, but you can just draw a rectangle as you wish, right? So there you go. That's our first element on it. I
hope you're following along, guys, because
yes,
the best way to do this is by doing it.
Mm-hmm. And I think so. Then from this, I think you can see clicking on this element on your, left-hand side. You'll see that it's underneath your piece of paper / your frame. You can see that it belongs in this frame. On your right-hand side, you can actually see there's a bunch of tools that are like alignment tools. If you just leave your cursor on them, they'll tell you what it does. Worst case scenario, you just click it and you can see what happens and you can always undo it. That's how I've learned Figma often. But the most powerful tool I find is this tool, which is called Corner Radius. And this tool is magical because if we click it and let's say change it to like 20, now you suddenly have rounded corners. And I think it's just little details here and there that make Figma very much user-friendly. But I digress and let's move forward.
I agree though. That's I literally love rounding the corners. I don't know why, but it's just super easy. Okay.
I think that within your object, you have your layer settings, which allow you to essentially set in any layer modes. And if you are not a Photoshop or photo editing pro, you don't really need to worry about it. But the most important objects or categories are you can set a fill, which is the color of your object. You can set a stroke, which if I do, and I just make it bigger, sets an outline of the object. And then effects are essentially a variety of visual effects. You can choose from a drop shadow, an inner shadow, a layer blur, and a background blur. So right now I'll have a drop shadow on it. And then I don't touch export. Export is mostly for if you, want to export assets for handoff to developers. That's where you would use it, but we won't be using it in this case. So I have your first shape. And this is how, Figma designers get started. It's just a combination of shapes adding onto shapes, adding onto other shapes that create things. But let's say you want a shape that is not given within this list of items. Let's say I want a wave. This is where the pen tool comes in very handy. I think underneath is a pencil tool, which I don't typically use. I think it's just more freehand. A pen tool is essentially where you can set points. Let's say we click a point. We can click another point, and that creates a point. Or if we click a point and we hold it and we drag it, it creates a curve. So in this way, I can easily create a little wave. If that makes, let me know if I'm talking too fast.
No, it's perfect. You're doing well.
Now we have, and then, sorry, I just went through and I kind of just went around and filled it. And now we can actually fill it. And now we have a custom shape. And I think that is kind of how you would get started with an idea. Like maybe for a lot of people, you don't jump into Figma. You go through both the design thinking process, but then you go and you do some paper sketches because that's what you're familiar with. But once you got some like good paper sketches, like upload them into Figma and just trace over them and create these like more polished assets. And maybe that is another approach that you and often a lot of designers take.
Yeah.
So
exactly. And I don't know if you have to go or not.
Yeah, I do have to jump, but if you want to continue with it, let me, if anyone in the chat has any questions on Figma, I think I'm happy to like answer any questions over Slack or over Hopin. I will be back hopefully in half an hour and back to the Designathon, but I have a group meeting.
Perfect.
So, it was nice meeting all of you guys, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you, Longshi. Awesome. So I am just going to share my screen again. So if you ask questions, which please do, I will check it every couple of minutes to make sure that we're on the right track here. So jumping back in, that was a really good just overview of, basically why we use Figma and what we do on it. But obviously, if you're going to be creating an app or a web prototype this weekend, you might need something a little bit more than that to get you started. So what I have here actually is, this is the first app sort of walkthrough that I ever did in Figma. And so these were my first few frames. And I have to say, first of all, quite ugly. I was making a pet care app for feeding. And these two views, I did a lot of research and then I didn't actually apply it very well. So I went back and you can see like these were my iterations on it, and I still need to come back and finish this project. But the comparison between this and this is quite a lot. And so at the end of this weekend, if you're like, okay, I got a good start, maybe you have something that looks like this, which is not something to be like, oh, come on, what did I even do? Be proud of yourself, and then you'll get better with it. So I want you to walk away from this feeling a little bit more comfortable with things, though. So I want to actually delve in. So what I want you all to do is press F, or come over here and click the frame tool. One thing that is super, super helpful is that each of these has the little letter here. And so that's showing the keyboard shortcut. But obviously at this point, a lot of you may not know all of the keyboard shortcuts. I don't know all of the keyboard shortcuts. So what you want to do to learn that is go to help an account, and you can actually and you could actually just click the keyboard shortcut for this. But that is where you're going to get a little bit of an overview of how to speed up your process in this, because even just doing stuff over this weekend, if you're, for example, clicking the rectangle shape, it takes a lot more time to be going over here every time versus just clicking R. So each of these has all of the helpful tools that you need, and it's right built in here, so you can get started with that. But I'll pretend like you don't have that, and I'll go over in here and use this so that you can easily follow along. The first thing that we're going to do if we're replicating this is, so it's we're looking at an iPhone 11 Pro. So we're going to click that from our screen, and we're going to see that it's all the way over here. So this is where it's really helpful to be able to scroll over and know where your stuff is. And that's something that you're going to see over here. You can see how I have so many screens here. I mean, not so many in comparison to what you could have, but it's a lot to navigate. And so that's why, for example, this is a very good demonstration of what you shouldn't be doing. Each of these is clickable and you can rename them. And that's really what you need to do to be able to have a good system here. But we are on this. And actually first, I know that someone was asking about wireframing. As Longshi said, it's really good to just go in and first sketch it out, like with pen and paper, and like you can just take photos of that. But if you want to be using an app, one thing that you should look at is Miro. But another thing you can do is just do it in here. So we have our screen here, and if we're doing like a wireframe, we really want like the basics, and so this would be a high fidelity prototype. We have the image of the dog here. Basically, as soon as you start adding images and colors, then it's becoming more high fidelity. And the reason that we distinguish between these things is that say you're bringing what you've designed to your clients or to the company that you're designing for. As soon as you have high fidelity, they're going to be like, oh, I don't like that color, that's not on brand, versus being like, oh, that button there maybe doesn't make sense because of this reason, for example. So we're on here, and let's say that we are wireframing this this screen here. So we're sort of going back in time, and all you have to be doing is, okay, so you're thinking about the sign-in page. So maybe at first it's just you're thinking about, okay, there's an image here, and when you're wireframing this, there's some conventions of like doing different things to distinguish between like an image. So for example, you could have an image by just putting like the X's here, or if you have text, one thing, you have your text here, but it's like the lorem ipsum. I don't know how you say that, but the first step in wireframing is really just being able to get things on a page. And so this would be your welcome, and maybe your, if that you're having a sign-in page, obviously they need to sign in. And the sign-in page is the best thing to get started with, honestly, for prototyping, because it's something that you probably have a pretty good expectation of how it looks and what the components of it are. So you can really, get started with that. And to do that, so before long she was talking about the rectangle and rounded corners. That's honestly like the most used thing. So I have my rectangle here. I got it from over here. It's now the line symbol, but it would have been the rectangle. And of course, we're not looking over here at our layout, but we see that everything is in my frame over here. Instead, we're looking at the specifics of it. And if we're replicating this, then we notice, first of all, that we need to have the fill, and we don't actually want the fill as it is because it's white. So if there's something that you don't want, like in this example, then you can just minus it and look, it's gone. Perfect. And so again, we're going to use this corner radius, let's say 30. This is a little bit more rounded than this, but I'm not trying to replicate it exactly. I just want to give you an idea of what you guys are doing. And actually, one thing that I would like to get you guys to know is the fact that there are a lot of tools on here that make things easier. So for example, let's say that I'm on this iPhone frame, and I realize I actually don't want it to be an iPhone frame for this size. I want it to be smaller. So notice when I go like that, you know, nothing changes here. And you might be wondering why that is. Because when I go like this, you know, they move to the left-hand side and the top-hand side. And that is because the constraints of this object are fixed on the top and the left-hand side. So this is something that's really good to know when you're designing, because it means that, you know, if you're moving things around and changing things around, which you often do, you want to be paying attention with how you're moving things. So for example, if I was moving this frame around to make it wider, and I did want it to be on the other side, I can change it like this, and notice these little bars have come up, and that means that when I move this now, look, it moved with the other side. So that is a good thing to get started. I'm just going to check the chat. I see no one is asking questions. Oh, are there best practices to design in Figma so that everyone can understand our design? Yeah, so there's a lot of actually helpful resources out there in terms of not so much designing in Figma, but just designing in general and understanding that really, as I was talking before, there's a whole lot of assumptions that we make. For example, if you go to like any website, you're going to see that their call to action or their main button of maybe like log in or sign up is always going to be on the right-hand side at the top-hand corner, because that is where we have been trained to look. And so best practices are understanding where people go when they're navigating different screens, and designing your design to be fitting that. And that might be scary for you because you're like, I don't understand that. And that's where the testing comes in, so that you can be reflecting that and understanding what within your specific design is going to work best. Best practices in Figma, it's not so much best practices as just like knowing the tools that are here. And to be honest, like this 1 hour is just like really unrealistic in terms of showing you a whole bunch of stuff to be making, just because it does take a while to go through something. And there's so much that I want you to just be comfortable with the background of everything, that you know, it's hard to get through everything. But if you look at what we've done so far, it gives you some pretty good basics. For example, you know how to make a frame. Okay, so you know then that you can be starting a website or a mobile application from that. You know all of the shapes involved and how to use the pen tool. Maybe you're not an expert at that, but that just comes with practice. Placing an image is just as easy. You can do that. And then if you're working with other people, you can also add comments. So I can add a comment anywhere on here. So say, your partner is gone to eat lunch and you come on here and you're like, actually, I hate this image. And you can post that comment and they can see, and it's exactly on here and you can move it around like that. So that is super helpful. And if you are, working with this and you don't like the way things are laid out, remember that this left bar is here as well. So to navigate that, you're just going to be able to, move things around in here. So I just moved the line 2 down. You can't actually see that until I move it behind the rectangle. And now actually, if I click away, you can't see it at all. So that's navigating downwards. This is the bottom. And that's another thing that you should be keeping in mind. The best resource that I would be recommending to you is to actually follow Figma's tutorials, because they have some really helpful stuff. For example, like one thing I learned on there was like, I was always like, what are these layouts and auto layouts here? And this is something that's really helpful for responsive design, is that you need to be able to have a little bit more understanding of exactly where everything is. And so these grids can be really helpful for lining things up. And I direct you to that resource for that, because we just don't have time in this tutorial. But it's also helpful, just in terms of lining things up. One of the major problems that I came across in this project was that when I switched between different pages, I didn't have, everything wasn't in the right space. And this might be something that you struggle with. So I'm just going to show you that. And the way that you show, some of you might have come on here hoping that I would get to some clickable animations, clickable prototypes really on here. And so I'm gonna do that. Please be kind to me, because this is quite a basic project and showed the beginning of my journey. But if you press play like I did there, so you can see I just pressed that play button, what we're doing is, so I've gone through the design panel here. There's the prototype panel, and that is where all of this that I'm about to show you came from. And you can see these blue lines here are directing from what button goes to what page. So I'll show you that on the page, and then I'll come back here and you'll have a bit more of an understanding. So it is very slow to load, but you can imagine that this is your mobile screen. And so this is how you can test with people, is you come in here, okay, so someone comes in here, they're new, they're gonna click I'm new, and they're directed to the sign up page. Amazing, right? And so then you can go through and what people would do would go through and click their accounts. And if I had this all lined up, I actually had another file that would then have all of the different states. Because, if you think about it, you have this screen, and for each part of this, when someone types in their name, that's going to change, but nothing else is going to change. So actually what would happen would be that we would copy this screen and paste it, and what we would be doing is changing this so that it actually has, and this is the master here, it has the text that we're looking for. So we change that, and then we'd have another screen that would have the email filled out, so that when you click each of these, then it would come up with what people want. So then what you do is you would create an account, and I've probably just messed this up because I just copied and pasted that there. But once you sign in, then you come in here, you do the same thing, and you sign in. But what I really want to show you here is, maybe I've messed this up now, is that when I was here and we click to this other page to change view, what was happening was that all of this would change, because when you look in at this, I don't actually have these in the right position. So if you look at this one, this photo, this is all of the locations within the frame. So the X coordinate and the Y coordinate here are telling you exactly where on your screen it is. And then you have the width and height of the image. When you go to this other screen, so this one is 133, 169, you come to this other screen, this is absolutely not in the same location. So that's something that seems really basic, but when you get into all of this stuff, you're focused on so much that you forget some of the functionality of, like, okay, I need these things to be in the same spot. So if you copy pasted and then started adjusting this, then you're going to have this problem because it's different than what you originally had. So you need to pay attention to the X and Y coordinates and make sure that's the same throughout your screens. And now, another really important thing that I want you to do is be able to go in and use some plugins, and that is opening up the whole Figma community. So when you go back to your files, you can actually go to the community and you can search up plugins in here. You can see they advertise so well. And, you know, for example, I've searched up a plugin, and here's a whole bunch of plugins that you can then install. So you can go in, and obviously mine didn't work because I've already got this installed, but you can install that. And the reason that I would suggest that you look up a list of like the best plugins to use this weekend is because when you're back and once you've installed some plugins, then you can go to your drafts, go in there and actually use them. So that when you use a plugin, you're clicking the right-hand side of your screen. You're gonna click plugins, and you can see all of them here. You can just bring it up. So by clicking it, it's running inside of your window here. And this is a great way to get images. And these are all like free stock images. So really, really helpful. So I've actually just added some minimal stuff, minimal images to mine, but you can also search in there, which is really helpful. And the last thing that I want to show you, and I really apologize because there's so much to go through, and it's hard to budget all of this time and go through things. So I understand if you guys have a lot of questions. I'm so happy to answer them. So type them in the chat now, and I'll possibly stay a few minutes now, but then we can also bring things up in some private messages throughout this weekend. But the last thing that I want to do is show you how to create a component. What is a component? It's basically when you have an app, you're having a lot of things that are really staying the same essentially throughout your app. So it makes things easier to have a master copy and have another whole bunch of child copies that you can change individually. So what we could do now is, let's say that I'm going to make a rectangle, okay, and I am going to click it, and I want to make it a component. So you're gonna go down here, scroll down. See, there's so many options here that really come down to a lot of things you're familiar with that you can navigate from here, but also things you might not be familiar with. So things like using a mask, which is really helpful, but we won't get to right now. Creating a component though, just changed this item to purple. And the reason that we do this is that I can have that, and I'm going to copy and paste it, and now I have a child component. So when I change this shape, I change the child component. So I can change the master. I can make it orange. Beautiful. I made the child orange as well. But I change the child and I don't change the parent. So a whole bunch of magic going on here. So that's something that is really helpful. And yeah, it doesn't seem as helpful maybe right now, or you might be a little bit confused because that was a pretty bad job of showing the application. But it's helpful when you're doing a lot and you want to have something that you can quickly change because maybe you think that this rectangle was too thick and now it needs to be smaller, and you don't want to have to go through and change all of them, okay? But you'll notice that now I change this and I'm not changing the child. So you have to be careful of how much you change the child, because then it's going to not change when your parent changes. So that was a whole bunch of, you know, just an overview of all of the things that you could do. It might be helpful to like walk through, you know, making a really simple design like a sign-in page or something like that, just to get yourself comfortable with. And when you do that, if you have questions in that, send them to me. I'm just going to see if there is questions. Can you continue the wireframe explanation so that we can know what the wireframe submission will look like in comparison to the fine art board submission? Yeah, so I can keep going with that for a couple minutes after 9 o'clock. If there's anyone else who has, so I see I'm being cut off here. Miriam,
no, you're not being cut off. I just wanted to hop in really quick before you do your questions. Can you go back to your child and parent component example and show what happens when you change only one property on the child, but then, for example, if you change the color on the parent?
Yes, I hope I understood that, but okay, so let's say I change this to be longer. That's a child. And now I believe if I change the parent to a different color, wow, see, the other part has changed. So if you change one component of it, the other component is, you know, going to stay the same to an extent. And this is where I'm not as much of an expert here, because there are things that, you know, when I don't know at what point things break, and that it's too far away from the original design, but I think it is segmented into, you know, changing shape or changing color, that kind of thing. That was a good question, Jeff, because I'm sure people had that. If there are other questions, please send them in the chat, or please send them to me. So you can do that on, I believe, on the MDL. I'm just MDL Rachel, and I'm available to talk throughout this weekend. But going back to this wireframe, I'll go for a little bit longer. But if you are like, okay, I really need to get started on this this Designathon prompts, then au revoir. Thanks for coming on, and good luck this weekend. If you want to know a little bit more about the wireframe and what that looks like versus the final artboard, I'll just continue with this. Actually, it might be helpful to just search up lo-fi prototype, because this is really what the end product looks like. And to everyone, to an extent, the difference between like a low fidelity prototype versus high fidelity is like a little bit debatable. But it is this whole idea of, you know, what is super basic is lo-fi, and you're not worrying about the images and everything. It's more about having that structure. So you can see that even before you're having that text and everything and worrying about having some text in there, you can literally just have lines in there. And this is why I really suggest that you're not actually doing your super low fidelity prototypes in Figma, because it still limits you. And like, for example, I will use, I don't even know what I have on here. I have parts of the brain, so that's super great. Love the lesions. But I will come on here and I will literally pull out my pen and I'll draw it on here. You know, you can draw like this. It's not about looking pretty. It's about actually, you know, thinking about what you're putting on the page. So when you do that, and you're thinking about, so let's say maybe I have a restaurant, and this is a restaurant ordering app. So at the top, usually we'd have our bar, and maybe we have a menu to the left here. And we're gonna have like welcome back text here. And maybe we have some profile information on our right. Then we're thinking about things, and maybe the most important part of this, I don't know, food app is actually the drinks. So that's coming first, and you have something there, and then you're going to have all of your cards here. So you have all of your different cards here that you would make in Figma. You'd be making with the rectangle and rounding the corners, and then playing with shadows and such. And you can show that it actually is scrollable here by having that continue, so that people know the interaction is that you keep swiping on there. And maybe in here, we're going to have or maybe this is the image, and below it we're having some text about, you know, what's the most important thing when we're ordering. Maybe it's the nutritional content. I don't know if this app is going to be something that is, maybe it's one restaurant and they're talking about all of their apps or not apps, but drinks. And then it's maybe nutritional content, the flavors down here, and the price, because we live in a world run by money. And so that's happening between all of these cards. And this is, again, why components are so handy, is because I wouldn't have to be writing all of that out. If I had up here, the best practice in Figma is to, you'd have sort of your asset library, okay? And that's where you can go through and be like, okay, this is what a drink card is. This is my master component for that, so that you're changing things here. And it's also helpful in here to maybe, this is the branding. I can't write with my screen facing up, but when you're getting to higher fidelity and actually putting this in here, it doesn't mean that you're not thinking about it earlier. You're thinking about even like the color psychology of like, maybe this isn't something that you're too concerned with, because these brands already have a established coloring, but you want to make sure that that's consistent. So maybe you're thinking about, okay, for all of the drinks, the text is in Montserrat. So you'd have a menu of title is in Montserrat or heading, and then subheading is in, this one's in Montserrat bold, this one is in, maybe medium or regular. And that's something actually that I there we go, you can see my notes there. If we go up here, when you're in the text part and you're playing around with that, notice that you can change. A lot of options that are popular will be in here if they have the capability for the font family. If you're adding fonts from like, sometimes they'll go online and I'm like, oh, I want some new fonts, and then I'll download them locally to my computer. And if you're working on, for example, the desktop on here, I can add, so for example, this was a local font, and there's only one option. So that might just be the way it is there's only regular for you. But for other fonts that are more popular, there's going to be more options. So that obviously shows that when you do start thinking about all of those things, there's all of these more considerations that you need to be making. And that is why, oh, I've lost my screen here. There we go. That's why we start with this basic part. And so it is really good to be thinking of this is super functionality. What are the different parts? And maybe so this was drinks. And what's below that, and how much of the screen is it taking up? Like how important is this, and how important is it compared to the action that we want the users to be taking? Are we wanting people to buy? Because, like, for example, if we're on mobile and we're wanting people to buy, then the buy button should be most easily accessible, and be taking up screen space. And what happens on mobile is that, you think about how you hold your phone. I hold my phone. I don't know if you guys can see me like this right here. But everything that is in this bottom section here is going to be the most easy to access. And so that's going to be reflected in, you want the most easy to access capabilities to be down there in, basically have the things that you want people to be doing the most easy to do. And so you can see from this that you don't have to be doing artistry here for that part of the submission, but the difference between what I just showed you and what I want you to be sending in is the fact that I want to have your explanations for these things. Because I just sort of talked through all of the things that I was considering. But, if I wasn't here and didn't get to hear all of the things I was considering, I'd be like, what does this actually mean? Because yes, this is your brainstorming, but then you want to understand, if someone else is looking at this, can they understand your brainstorming? And so for each of these points, you might have, something coming out here and being like, I have this here because, this is the reason why, or this is taking up the most space because this is the most important for our users, etc. I hope that gives a little bit more clarity in that. I don't know if there is more questions in here. Just to clarify, I don't have to necessarily use Figma for the wireframe sketches and can sketch out my own ideas. Perfect, absolutely perfect. Yes, that's exactly it. You can use whatever you need to use. We're putting these things on here for suggestions, like Figma is a good go-to just for the reasons I've outlined earlier, but if you have another software that you use for any part of this process, use it. What we're trying to see here is your thinking and can you come up with a good idea and justify it. So as long as you're doing that, you're good to go. Good old visuals field defects on the left side of the screen can escape. Yes. So I think that we've run over time a little bit, and I hope this has been helpful. I don't know if it's just been me like talking on a screen, but I also know that this might bring up a whole bunch more questions than you came into it with. So if there are things that, again, if you have questions, reach out to me, please. And it's really good if you have like a specific question, like we can just hop in, I don't know how to say it. Then we can go through that together, because I think, you know, the whole team is just trying to be here to support you guys. And I don't want any of you to walk away from this being like, this is something I can't do. It's something you can do. It's something that, you know, I'm learning and trying to do. So yeah, that's what I want you to take it away with. And as you're going through this process, as I'm also a part of the marketing team, make sure that you are sort of documenting your process. And if you send us a video of what you're learning, or if you're posting on your social medias, take a photo and send it to us, and we'll actually enter you in a raffle to win a $25 gift card. So super exciting, because we love that. So, and as many times as you enter is as many times as you will be put into this raffle. So keep promoting what you're learning, and you know, you'll reap even better rewards. So make sure you're doing that. Also make sure that you're coming to our other workshops, because I know this was a lot, but there's going to be some helpful workshops tomorrow in terms of like, how are you presenting your design, because that's a really key thing that I will also be at. So hopefully you're not sick of me yet. And also going more into Illustrator and, you know, coming up with sort of the supporting illustrations for your design and getting more familiar with that kind of content. And I think that is it from me. I know Jeff is on here. So Jeff, if you want to pop on and say any other closing words, feel free. I know that there is a movie starting. Oh, there he is. Maybe he's about to talk about that. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoyed that, and have a great evening.
Yeah, I guess just to kind of close off, thank you so much for hosting this workshop, Rachel. You know, I think it was really insightful for people just to kind of get like the feel for Figma and, you know, at least learn a little bit about it. I know it was pretty tight on time and there was just a lot to kind of go through. But I think you really did a great job, and you know, I think a lot of people kind of appreciated that. So thank you so much for hosting that. I guess to talk about the movie, I'm going to cancel the broadcast. I'm going to let it process this workshop because we can't record the movie. And then afterwards, I'm going to come back on. We'll do some audio testing, and then we can stream the movie. Alrighty.
Perfect. I didn't realize we were holding that up. So very good that we're ending that now. But yeah, thank you guys, and see you throughout this weekend. Bye.